Hello and welcome to Inside Sports. I'm your host, Todd Blackstock. On today's show, we have a veteran sports writer, Dan O'Neill, in the house to discuss his latest book on the St. Louis Blues. Plus, Melanie Steen was on hand for the return of the XFL with a new coach with St. Louis ties. And we have a local story about a basketball tournament benefiting a great cause. So stay with us for this and much more coming up next on Inside Sports. Today, Inside Sports reporter Melanie Steen was on the scene at Ballpark Village with the return of the XFL and the St. Louis Battlehawks. Melanie, take it away.
Todd, thanks. Well, after a 2-year hiatus, the XFL is back here in St. Louis. The new owners kept the Battlehawks name and the overall look, but this time around they've got a new head coach, and today we are meeting him. Okay, Coach, so this is the most important question. I need to get it out the way. What is the battle cry for the Battlehawks?
Wow, you know, it's been a minute. I've been wanting to say it, but yes. I didn't want to give away, obviously, the team name and the logo, but Caw is where it's at.
Caw! 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 Caw!
These fans are season ticket holders and were treated to a special event featuring the president of the XFL, Russ Brandon, as well as Coach Becht, who says he wants their games to be an amazing experience.
And, I'm going to be selfish and greedy. I want more. So more fans, more calls of law, whatever it is, whatever they want to do, that's great. But I'm all for it, and it's pretty exciting. You know, part of my role, obviously, as a coach and being a part of what this league is from the ground floor is, engaging with the fans and the community, making sure my players do the same thing. Without the fans, there is no league.
We love football and we love sports in general. So, but there was a little something to prove last time around. Hopefully we're beyond that and we could just get down to the fun factor.
Fans Brian Mathis and his friend Scott Walther were season ticket holders the last time around and will be again in 2023. The pair recalls how much fun those games were from a couple of years ago.
Getting around the other people and the fans, the high-fiving, the hugging, fist bumping everybody. It just, it makes you young again.
I'm the first lady of the XFL because I post everything. When I get XFL news, I post it to all the groups. I post it to all my friends. It goes everywhere.
But the fan base is here, and if anything, I think it's going to be louder. There's going to be more people and more involved.
Following his 11 years in the NFL as a player, Becht would go on to become a coach, working with high schoolers, college players, and with the minor league team, the San Diego Fleet. He was the tight end coach of the AAF team under head coach Mike Martz. Fans might remember Coach Martz from his time leading the St. Louis Rams. Becht was a first-round draft pick by the New York Jets in 2000 and has had a long-standing relationship with the organization ever since. But as he prepares to take the helm of the St. Louis Battlehawks, he's aware his time with the Jets is winding down.
I cover the Jets. I do pre and post for them for this season. I'll finish that out. They brought me in day one as a first-round draft pick, and they've basically all the way through, they've been by my side throughout my career, even after.
The upcoming season of the XFL will see some familiar faces, but mostly new coaches, including Becht, who's just taking it all in.
You got Coach Stoops, Coach Phillips, and Hazlitt, and I was with Hazlitt here when he took over, when Linehan was fired mid-season. Excellent coaches, right? I mean, just a wealth of knowledge. They've been there, done that.
He says there is nothing but respect and admiration for his fellow head coaches in the XFL. But once the new season starts, who knows how the competition will heat up.
We'll form some rivalries together, but we're all in this together to make this league great, and that's what's the best part about it. So we're going to develop players, we're going to win games, and we're going to bring something great to the cities we're coaching in.
So the wait is almost over for the St. Louis Battlehawks. Their very first game will happen in mid-February. Todd, back to you.
Thanks, Melanie. Good to have pro football back at the Dome. Caw-caw! Well, joining us now in studio is a veteran St. Louis sports writer who covered local sports for over 30 years at the Post-Dispatch and has recently released his latest book. At this time, we welcome author Dan O'Neill to Inside Sports. Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you again, bud.
Yeah, we're excited.
I'm not going to do a caw, though.
You're not going to do a caw?
No.
Oh, come on.
I'm not good at it.
You're a blues and a golf guy, but it's kind of fun to have the Battlehawks back. I mean, I covered one game, went to a couple others. The whole lower bowl was full, and people were tailgating outside just like a Rams game, but maybe not quite as extended out into the city, but it was kind of a smaller version, and heck, selling 30,000 seats and selling out for the XFL was kind of a testament to the hunger St. Louis has for football.
Well, look, I mean, that's all you need to know. I mean, they were here and people supported it, and this is a great sports town. I mean, they've supported 2 NFL teams here and had them taken away under less than pleasant circumstances. So I think it's great. It's another thing to do. It's great for the cultural part of the city, and if people are behind it, it's fun, and so good for them. Yeah,
let's see it happens because, COVID kind of cut everything short. I mean, everything was booming. I mean, the Blues just, won the Stanley Cup, and we've got NCAA events coming to town that are canceled. Hopefully we can recreate that now with maybe a lesser economy. But let's talk about you a minute. You had a column in the Post-Dispatch for, 32 years. Primarily, I believe, covering the Blues, and you were the bogeyman doing a lot of golf. And I know St. Louis has had some great LPGA and PGA tournaments along the way, and there's lots more to come. But do you have any LPGA or PGA events that you covered that really come to mind? Because St. Louis really supports golf.
Well, I mean, I think everybody remembers the 2018 PGA Championship, which drew unbelievable crowds to Belle Reve. As we were just talking, a great sports town. They've also always supported golf, especially national events like that. So they had incredible crowds at Belle Reve. And then there was the scene of seeing Tiger Woods. Not only did he contend and compete well that week, but when he was leaving, he stopped on the bridge and waved to everybody, and they just had these humongous crowds. So I think that'll always stick with anybody who was ever there. And it was really... fortunately, people got a chance to see Tiger play that week because it wasn't too long after that he had the horrible accident, and now we don't know what's going to happen with him. But I'll remember that. I covered a lot of Masters and a lot of U.S. Opens, so I saw Tiger do a lot of great things, but that really sticks out just because of the connection he had with the St. Louis crowd.
Yeah, I remember when they had a senior event here and Arnold Palmer was out there, and they were putting on a display, to the local fans that were out there just like, before the tournament started. And I mean, it was waves of people. Even LPGA events at, say, Forest Hills Country Club with Annika Sorenstam coming through, Lieselot Neumann, Pearl Sin, and Vicky, her name,
Fergus.
Vicky Fergus, yes.
Yes.
Good calls. I remember that one. I got my hat signed by her that day. I still have it in my closet. But, those events were hugely attended. Forest Hills. I remember people were having to park down the street at Chesterfield Mall and getting shuttled in, and, it was huge.
Yeah, it was a good fit. I really thought the LPGA was a terrific fit for St. Louis, which isn't the largest market in the world, but is still a pretty good-sized market. And they did draw well. They drew well both at Forest Hills and Fox Run. They moved out to Fox Run. But golf tournaments are tough. The reason that went away is the sponsorship went away. And it becomes harder and harder, especially in St. Louis, where we've lost a lot of the corporate community over the years, to try to get that title sponsor that you need to make those events happen. So you mentioned the senior event that used to be out at Boone Valley. They got a terrible break that one year where they got torrential rains, wiped out all the parking there, and they had to send people home. You couldn't, I remember I'm standing by the 17th green, and I'm watching Tom Watson chip in like he did at Pebble Beach years ago to win the U.S. Open. And I'm just like, oh my God. And there's no clapping in the press box, but you're waiting for this gallery to erupt. And I look around and there's about 12 people there standing around because they couldn't have galleries, for their final round. So that hurt them. And then that tournament unfortunately went away. But we still have the Champions Tour out at Norwood Hills now every summer with the Ascension Classic. And that's been great, and they've done well with their crowd. So, and we have things coming up on a national scale. So, golf, it's hard for St. Louis to get a regular tour event, but they keep their toe in the water with some of these events that they get every once in a while.
So you've been part of the St. Louis Blues fabric, part of the family since, I guess, you're a teenager. I was reading where you actually finagled your way into the Arena Club at the beginning of the Blues days at the Arena, in their first few years. And so you've basically grown up through their whole existence and have covered it since.
Yeah, I was 15, and I actually lied about my age. And I got a job there when I was 16 during their first few seasons. I remember I was on the glass for Ron Schock's goal in double overtime in 1968 that sent the Blues to the Stanley Cup Finals. So I did that for 3 years. Worked in the Arena Club and saw, the players used to come in after the game. And I remember Jacques Plante with a big cigar and, his flamboyant French-Canadian style. And Norm Kramer would come in with his sequin jackets and play the organ to entertain people who would come into the Arena Club to eat beforehand and then come in afterwards for cocktails. So it was a different era, but that's the way it started, and that's when the Blues took hold here, and it became sort of like Beatlemania. They led the NHL in attendance for 5 years from 1970 to 75. So it was a big deal here in St. Louis, and I think ever since then, there's always been a connection between, for whatever reason, between the hockey team and the community. It's just a good fit. People in St. Louis tend to really embrace the hockey players. The hockey players have always been a little more accessible, a little more down to earth, if you will, than some of the other sports, and they embrace the community. And so it's been a good marriage between hockey and St. Louis. And I say, we were talking, my son has worked for the Blues now for about a dozen years as their media relations and communications director. So I've always kind of had a grip or a connection with the Blues.
Before we go to break and come back and talk in depth about your new book, I just wanted to let you know that, when you're looking back at the pictures of the Blues in the early days when you were working at the Arena Club, everybody was decked out. Everybody was in suits and ties. The ladies were all dressed in these beautiful dresses. They did their hair before they would come to the arena. And that's what most impressed me about the beginning of the Blues, was how well it was received and how people took pride in coming to the arena for those games.
I mean, I said Beatlemania. It wasn't quite that big, but it became a thing, in St. Louis to get dressed up and go to the hockey game on Saturday night. And like we were talking about the Arena Club, that was like a very nice restaurant or club inside the arena, and people did they wore their furs or their suits or whatever. And it was like a fashion statement, to go to the game.
Oh, yeah.
And then they had Norm Kramer on the organ, and they used to get out of their seats and bang their seats to When the Blues Go Marching In. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were talking about the song Gloria from their Stanley Cup win and how they thought that was their greatest song ever. And I said, I don't know. I remember being there when they would do When the Blues Go Marching In, and the team came on the ice, and the whole place would be rocking.
All right, well, I'm excited to jump back into this after the break. We're going to take a quick break, but stay with us as our conversation with Dan O'Neill continues. We're going to talk about his new book, The Best of the Blues. So stick around.
I got some Oxy after I hurt my neck. First I took them to feel better. Then I just kept taking them. I didn't know they'd be this addictive. I didn't know how far I'd go to get more.
independence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth.
Hey, welcome back to Inside Sports. We're visiting with longtime sports writer and author Dan O'Neill. Dan, you got a new book out, Best of the Blues. I don't know if you want to hold it up or we can get a shot in there right now. This is your latest book. Yep. You've written several over the years, and we discussed your history, as a St. Louis Blues fan, as a teenager working there, and covering it throughout their whole history. So you've been there, you've seen them. And what are some of the highlights of your book you'd like to discuss? I know that Glenn Hall was the first Blue ever selected,
right?
And I don't even know if the team had an ownership group in place yet.
Well, they did. They were late to the table with their ownership group, and they actually the NHL was ready to give a couple other cities the franchise, but the Blues had something going for them that some others didn't, which was they had the arena. And the arena was owned by the Chicago Blackhawks, who's their affiliate or their minor league team, the Braves, played here. And I used to go to their games when I was a kid.
Really?
But they owned the building, and it was dilapidated old building, hadn't had much attention over the years. They were anxious to get rid of it. So they became an advocate for the Blues ownership group, hoping they would get the franchise and eager to sell them the building, and that's really why they got the franchise.
That's pretty interesting.
But yeah, the book has a few sections. I start the book with a tribute to Bobby Plager, who I consider to be the best the Blues had to offer on numerous levels. And then there's the best players, which includes 25 players. Some of them hard, it was hard to make some decisions on some of them. Then there's the best of the rest, which is a few players who were right on the bubble there and deserve consideration as well. And then I have a section called the best of the brief, which is players who spent just one season here.
Like Scott Stevens.
Like Scott Stevens, right, or Derek Sanderson. But an interesting story from the best the best of the brief is you mentioned Glenn Hall. Well, everybody who follows hockey knows who Glenn Hall is. He's a Hall of Famer and one of the greatest goalies of all time. And the Blues drafted him in the expansion draft. But what people don't realize is they then signed Seth Martin to be their backup goalie. Seth Martin was a name that meant nothing to people in St. Louis. But the truth of the matter is Seth Martin was a big star in Canada. He had been a star on the international level, had played for Team Canada in the Olympics, had helped them win a World Cup. So he was very well known, and he was 34 years old when he signed to play with the Blues. He had never played professionally. So he came here, he and Glenn Hall really split the duties pretty evenly that first year. And Seth Martin was equally good as Glenn Hall. His numbers were really close. In fact, I think his save percentage was even better than Glenn Hall's. And when the season was over, the Blues approached him about re-signing for another season. But Seth Martin was a fireman in Trail, Nova Scotia. And if I have that right, Trail's the name of the city. I'm not sure about the off the top of my head. But anyway, he was a fireman in his hometown. And when they talked to him about another season, he realized that if he signed for another season, he'd lose his fireman's pension. So he said, thanks, but no thanks. And he went back home to be a fireman.
So no Seth for the Blues. Huh?
Yeah, so the money obviously was a little bit different.
It's talking about money. It seems like the Solomons who own the Blues, they really spent a lot of money up front. They had a lot of deferred contracts, and the arena cost a fortune to rehab and to maintain and to pay rent or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they kind of had to bow out after those first 3 years. Things kind of went down a little bit, didn't they?
Well, yeah, they did things different. In fact, the rest of the league wasn't real thrilled with the Solomons because they treated their players way better than anybody else did. I mean, they would take them on trips when the season was over. They'd all go to Florida together. They would have them out to their house for parties and things like that, and they would give them things like watches and things like that when the season was over. I mean, when Red Berenson scored 6 goals in a game, they had a special night for him here, and they gave him a station wagon and a shotgun and a canoe. So they treated the players unlike anyone else. But yeah, it was a financial drain. And so as the years went by, they ran into financial trouble and had to bow out. And then, of course, since then, the Blues have gone through a few owners. Now they're back in local ownership and doing well.
Yeah, it seems like they're on pace right now. At the point of this recording, they're on a little bit of a slide right now, but they've got a good coach and they've got a great organization. I want to take a step back to when Ron Caron, the professor, and Jack Quinn were wheeling and dealing. I mean, they were signing Scott Stevens for 5 first-round picks, and then they signed Shanahan. Then they lose Scott Stevens in this arbitration with Judge Houston. They were signing Peter Nedved and just all kinds of big names, and it seemed like they were mavericks to the league, and the league didn't appreciate it, I don't think, and it seemed like the Blues were being punished for trying to win.
Yeah, they were mavericks. I mean, the Scott Stevens signing was really the first time anyone signed a free agent in the NHL. I mean, the way it worked then was the players could become a free agent. They could accept a offer from another team, and then their existing team had the opportunity to match the offer. And in fact, when the Blues they tried to sign Stevens again after losing him, and when he was with the New Jersey Devils a couple of years later, they tried to re-sign him. They made him an offer, but this time the Devils matched it. So he stayed in New Jersey. But yeah, it was a really entertaining time to follow the Blues. It was really, I think, the only time in their history that they've actually been able to match headlines with the baseball team here in town. And, the baseball team usually gets most of the gravy when it comes to coverage and things like that. But at that time, when the Blues were making trades for Brett Hull and signing Scott Stevens and Brendan Shanahan, and then trading Brendan Shanahan for Chris Pronger and doing all kinds of headline kind of things. I mean, and we didn't even talk about them signing Wayne Gretzky, who was the biggest star in the game. So that period from about 85 to 95 was really entertaining. It didn't produce a Stanley Cup, but it was a lot of fun to cover the team.
It was, and you knew they gave it everything. One time I was at a Blues game in the last row of the lower bowl, and Ron Caron was in the first row right next to me in the lower, the first seat in the, the luxury suites, the suites. And we just sat there and had a conversation during the game. He was just talking to me like a regular guy. It was so funny. And think about all the coaches that were here. I mean, Scotty Bowman. I mean, just think if he would have stuck around and maybe got a little part of the ownership group. Jacques Demers. Then Mike Keenan comes in and cleans house. We almost get to a Stanley Cup, and then he gets run out of town.
Well, it's funny when you think about that. Now what we're talking about now is the year that they signed Gretzky, and they went into the play. I remember that Gretzky joined the team, and they played their first game in Vancouver, and their starting lineup that night was Gretzky at center, Brett Hull on one wing, Shane Corson on another, Chris Pronger on one side defense, Al McInnes was the other defenseman, and the goalie was Grant Fuhr. Now, 5 of those guys are in the Hall of Fame.
Wow.
So with the trade for Gretzky, they really felt like they had a great chance to win the Stanley Cup. And they played Scotty Bowman's Red Wings, who had set a record with, I think, 62 wins that year, and were supposed to, just plow through the playoffs and win the Stanley Cup. They took him to a Game 7. They took him to overtime. Gretzky lost the puck. It went to Yzerman. He shot the puck from the blue line, and it beat John Casey. The Blues got a bad break because Grant Fuhr got hurt during the first series with Toronto. But John Casey actually played really well. He just gave up that really unfortunate goal. So that game ends 1-0. The Red Wings win. They go to the Cup. Gretzky does not re-sign here. Within the year, Keenan was gone. At the end of that next season, Brett Hull was gone. Yeah. So that one goal, and Gretzky told me if he felt they were going to win the cup that year, and if not for that goal and they had won, he probably would have re-signed, and all that stuff would have been different.
Crazy.
So-
An open net, Shane Corson missed, in an overtime.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we're gonna head on out of here. Talk about your book. Where can we get? I know we get it at Barnes and Noble, some different places around town.
Sure. Everywhere you normally get fantastic books, but you'll also order it from Reedy Press, ReedyPress.com. And it's at some of the area Schnuck stores as well, I believe. So it's a great Christmas gift, great conversation kind of book. So I hope people get out and take a look at it.
Guys, I feel like we could go on for another couple hours here talking about the Blues. Thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it. All right, right now on Inside Sports, we're going to send it back over to Melanie Steen, who gives us the scoop about a basketball tournament benefiting a great cause.
It's definitely something that we needed.
Friday nights are typically prime time for some late night fun with friends, whether it's hanging out or staying in. That means playing basketball till 1 a.m. is probably not on the radar for most guys. Well, enter a Nothing But Nets. It's a Friday night basketball league for young men between the ages of 18 and 32.
This time of the hour, we're getting these guys in here to play some basketball. And they're excited. A lot of these kids are excited about this, and they look forward to it and taking it personal and getting out on the floor, man, getting it in.
The goal of the league is to help mentor these young men and provide valuable life skills. Basketball is just a means to get them in the door while also giving them something productive to do on the weekend.
Absolutely, that's the whole goal of this program, is to bring kids off the streets and to do something positive with themselves and playing basketball. You get done playing basketball, man, you're ready to go home and lay down for the next day. So that's the whole goal.
The season for Nothing But Nets ran from early September until late October. For years, NBA superstar Jason Tatum called the Wohl Center his training ground. In 2019, the Celtics player proudly gave back to the center with a refurbished court now bearing his name.
Well, it's truly been a pleasure to work with these young men. You know, they have made tremendous strides as we have participated in this awesome league that Mayor Tashara Jones have sponsored for us.
I grew up at Wohl's. Grew up playing basketball at Wohl's. I've been playing basketball at Wohl's my whole life, so ever since I was a kid, it's been like my second home. So when I got the opportunity to play here, it was a no-brainer.
Potts says that catching up with old friends is definitely the hook. And seeing Coach Mike Nettles also brought back a feeling of nostalgia.
Probably that we get to play basketball for fun now. A lot of us play college basketball, which was everybody was trying to focus on getting on to the next level. But right now we just get to relax and play basketball and just have fun with it like we did when we was a kid.
While it may be more laid back than playing in college, these guys are competitive nonetheless.
They have progressed tremendously throughout the league. We're in the semifinals, and I'm hoping that we can make it to the championship tomorrow.
Of course, the ultimate goal is to take home a trophy. But these guys are all winners, especially to their friends and family who've shown up for them each and every Friday night.
Every week I got at least 3 or 4 people coming and watch me play. Actually, my girl, she comes to every game. My mom, she been to a few games. My brothers and sisters normally come.
Well, my ultimate goal, I hope, from this league, I can help young men become productive citizens of society.
I'm Melanie Steen reporting for Inside Sports.
Thanks, Melanie. Glad to have you back on STL TV. Well, that's our show for today. We'd especially like to thank Dan O'Neill for joining us in studio. We'd like to thank you for watching Inside Sports on STL TV. Experience St. Louis.